Okay, I apologize for that. Mic was muted. Sometimes that mic gets muted, and I'm not exactly sure what happens, but just skip ahead to this, and uh, we've got Dorian turning off of the Hispaniola coast, north of Hispaniola, say 200 or 300 miles. And so I apologize for the mic being off. Sometimes my computer turns that off. I'm not exactly sure. I hadn't exactly figured out why it does that. But so you've got this turning off of the Hispaniola coast and moving towards the Bahamas. That will just take 3 to 4 days to move towards the Florida coast up here, and you can see the distance that it has to go, and we'll see that throughout Sunday. I believe we'll see landfall sometime Monday, and I'm not sure if it's going to make a complete landfall or what. So let's show you what the most recent models are showing. I had this pulled up, and give me just a second. Okay, so here you can see this is the most recent European model, Dorian, here on Monday in the Bahamas, early Monday morning, and then meandering through the Bahamas Tuesday. And so the model, the weird thing is, models were showing a quicker system 2 to 3 days ago, and now they've backed off of that. You can see it's high pressure up here though. And I'll back it up because that's really what's pushing Dorian kind of down and flat and almost due west. That high pressure right there is pinching it. And this also high pressure right here is going to kind of funnel it right through here and keep it where it can't really move west and it can't really move east. So it just kind of stays where it's at and kind of flows right here. And there's a lot of uncertainty to where exactly it goes. Does it stall? Does it continue inland? Does it affect western North Carolina? A lot of uncertainty, and I really don't have the answers for you for Western North Carolina tonight. I think that there is a great possibility of rainfall into Wednesday of next week, Wednesday or Thursday of next week, but I'm still just real uncertain about how far in the storm's going to make it and what those effects will be for Western North Carolina. So again, a difficult storm to forecast, but people in South Florida and the east coast of Florida should really be preparing themselves for a decent sized storm, and I'm concerned honestly for that because the those locations we saw it with Matthew, I believe, that just kind of moved all the way up this coast, and that onshore flow just created so much damage on the coast, even up here into South Carolina. And that's kind of what these models are hinting at. Let's run it on out, and we'll show you as the European model just takes it right up the coast, 960 millibar low pressure. So as it moves on up the coast, then just kind of buries it into the interior of Georgia, and this is way far out, so these models can't be trusted, but honestly, it's really interesting because this is such a slow system. I mean, this is 10 days worth of models, and the system is still on the maps. So what that tells you is there's really no steering current with this entire system, and that will make it a difficult forecast because it's just going to kind of have a mind of its own. And it's going to create, in my opinion, a tremendous amount of flooding along the coastal areas. So let's run through several models. I've got a bunch of these up. Here's the most recent European. This is kind of the ensemble track forecast. You can see many of those, most of those bring it into somewhere along Florida, but a lot of them just kind of scrape it. And so we could be following this system for a while. Honestly, it may not make landfall. These things have a tendency to just kind of teeter offshore and kind of tease with a landfall. And the way Florida is positioned, it's not straight up and down, straight north to south. So that hurricane could very well just kind of follow the coast, kind of what the European is showing. Let's look at the GFS. This is what the most recent. Hang on, let me pull up the most recent. This is the The 12Z. I believe the 18Z is out right now. Yeah. Okay. So run this out, and it'll give you an idea of what the GFS is showing. Give me just a second. It's loading. Site's been receiving a ton of traffic on Tropical Tidbits. So here you can see the GFS. Also a Southern Florida hit, and kind of around West Palm Beach or Fort Lauderdale area. Lots of population in these areas, so watch for those evacuations to occur. I'd expect to see people moving to the north, and they could even be coming into western North Carolina. That seems to be one of the safer spots to be. But you can see as that recurve occurs and gets kind of picked up by a trough. This is on Saturday of next week. We're just dealing with this system for a long time, so just get used to it for the next week. It's going to be talked about, and will likely into Saturday even affect the Carolina coast. So just a really slow moving storm. Main story with this is likely going to be onshore flooding, and that onshore flow constantly is going to create erosion, and we will see countless flooding and high water rescues after this drops 10 plus inches of rainfall along the coast. So that's my main thing that I'm watching for. We'll pull up I wanted to show you guys what the HWRF model is showing. So it goes every 6 hours, and this is the long wave infrared satellite that you can see as I run through the progression. This is all this is the whole run, and into Saturday it's a little bit quicker with the system, but still into Sunday has it in the Bahamas in some wild rapid intensification right here. Almost turns into a buzzsaw type look. Not sure that this model tends to overdo things sometimes, so not exactly sure that we'll see too much of this buzzsaw look, but the solution has to be given merit because it's producing it, and we're somewhat close to a landfall, and folks in Florida need to be taking these models seriously. The National Hurricane Service is doing a great job, though, providing that track, and so this landfall is a little bit closer to Palm Beach or Palm Bay, Vero Beach, and so a little bit farther south is what the European and the GFS are showing. This model indicates that it's going to barrel through Florida, and there could be some redevelopment occurring. Now, the farther west that this storm gets, the more it's going to affect western North Carolina, in my opinion. So the farther it goes across the screen, the farther across Florida it gets, eventually it's going to come back across South Carolina, Georgia, and how far, if it gets into Alabama and comes up, it's really going to hammer western North Carolina with a lot of rain. There's a ton of solutions on the table. Many of them don't indicate that that's possible, but this solution does indicate that traverse will happen and over Florida, and that will minimize the rainfall for the coastal areas, but it'll bring a lot higher threat to western North Carolina. So we'll also look at, this is the HMON. This model also shows a South Florida landfall. You can see a pretty ragged storm, and then we get some rapid intensification as it gets in those real shallow warm waters of the Bahamas, and a very limited shear environment. The atmosphere will be able to stack itself, and we will really get an enhancement of a storm. Not sure what's going to happen here with the Bahamas. You've got several little island chains there that are all tourism dependent, and then this kind of takes a turn towards Miami. And so lots of uncertainty. I said yesterday in my article that you couldn't rule out even a Miami strike. This thing can't be ruled out to even just kind of miss this and go into the Gulf, but that's not what most models are showing. We'll see a little bit farther south tick, and it's not going to run into much land and receive too much interaction. So we'll see with that. Like I said, lots of uncertainty. This storm is slowed down tremendously, and that is creating havoc with models. And as that high pressure pushes it on in, we just talked about that high pressure that's going to push in, and we showed it on the European model, and I'll pull that up one more time for you to see. If you're just joining us, here's that high pressure. That steering current is going to push Dorian into the coast somewhere. Now it's going to break down eventually, and that's when the storm begins to move a little bit more north, and but not for a while. And as it approaches, the European model shows it approaching Florida on, this model shows it on Wednesday morning. So some models show it Monday, some models show it making landfall Tuesday. There's a real issue with how quick the steering currents are going to push this into its natural direction. And but we'll keep you updated. I'm going to do a live update tomorrow. I'll probably do that one on Facebook. And I'll be out of town this weekend, but I'll be back Saturday or Sunday, and we'll give you a better idea of. So you can see the European model brings it right into the interior of the Carolinas. Something to really watch. Not exactly sure how this is going to unfold, but let's switch over to my other screen, and we'll give you a overview of the track. And this is my new screen that we'll be using from time to time to show you various other information. I've got all the tracks on here, and you see that the National Hurricane Center is indicating that hang on one second, my camera turned itself off. All right. So here we are live. Okay, so we've got the Category 4 is what the National Hurricane Center is indicating, but we've got several different tracks here. These are all the various model tracks that go down towards Fort Lauderdale, Port St. Lucie, Vero Beach, Palm Bay. Some of the models bring it all the way through Florida. Many of them recurve it. So there's a discontinuity as to how much that high pressure is going to force it into the coast of Florida, how far it's actually going to go. Does it get to the other side of Florida? Does it affect Tampa? There's just a great amount of uncertainty here, and I'm really concerned with Florida if this thing actually does what some of the models are showing and moves up through the coast right here, and especially the areas that it kind of just meanders along, we'll struggle seeing, we're getting news out of there and stuff. They're going to see some high winds and a lot of onshore flooding. This storm's going to have a lot of push with it. It's been going for a while, and be interesting to see how exactly it affects the coast of Florida. But I think we're going to see some devastation, and I'm really worried about the coast. Western North Carolina, though. Let's talk one more time about Western North Carolina. So sit down back at my computer, and we'll keep that track up there also for you, so you can look at that. Apologize once again for the microphone being muted as we began. I know that seems to happen sometimes, but just this program doesn't really give me much indication that things are muted. But so let's talk about Western North Carolina. Couple minutes. This high pressure here, 10, 20 millibars, 10, 24, 10, 20. That's all, when you've got a really strong low pressure down here, that will affect and those upper atmospheric patterns and high pressure and low pressure will work against each other. And this will, in fact, it doesn't really look like much on the radar, but it will, in fact, push all of that into the coast, and that will create problems along on the Florida coast. So here's that high pressure pushing Dorian into the coast of Florida, or right. I really wouldn't be surprised to see a model or two flip to this idea of it missing Florida or hitting the Keys and just keeping on going. We could be talking about this storm for a while, but most of the models right now show a recurve, but they've been continuing to trend south, and we're talking about Monday or Tuesday, so that's a lot of time for the models for this to change and for steering currents to be realized in the atmosphere. And so I'm just not taking any bets on exactly where it's going. People, south of Orlando, in my opinion, on the Atlantic coast of Florida, should be taking this seriously. Should be considering leaving and moving north, to northern Georgia. The best place to be is away from those high winds and the flooding. I know sometimes up in the mountains we do experience that type flooding, but we tend to be some of the safer places to be when a hurricane comes. I know Ivan and Francis, which this has some characteristics of Francis, we could see some flooding from this. I'm not super concerned about that right now. The winds and the landfall are kind of what I'm focusing on at this moment, because we're several days away from seeing rainfall from this storm in western North Carolina. So thank you for joining me. Really appreciate all you guys' support and you guys downloading the app. We'll try to keep doing these to make the app worthwhile and to give you a little bit of exclusive content. Really appreciate your support once again, and thank you for joining me.